Hi, and welcome to the special episode of the FIDE segment of the Chicken Chess Club podcast. Here, I have Mr. Dodgy or Michael Duke with here me as a guest, and we are gonna talk about things in the chess world or the political chess world. A bit of everything, I guess, right?
Yeah. Hello, Pierre. It's good to be here. So I think we should deal with the big topic before we get into anything else. Where are Jan and Laurent?
Well, as I said, we are doing the feeder segment, and they are not really part of that, so they are skipping this one. And what happened to the podcast in the future? Who knows? It's suspended temporarily, I would say, and if it's ever going to reemerge, yeah, I mean, I never lie, right? So I basically honestly say I don't know. We will see, but right now it's going to be me and Mr. Dutchy, and we're going to talk about feed and stuff.
Yep. We have to be hashtag transparent about everything. But okay, so what's been going on in the chess world over the past month? Because we've missed a lot of stuff.
A month is too much, I would say. But I mean, even in the chess part, Magnus is also, let's say, the focal point, and perhaps also so here, right? A big episode was during the Qatar Open. Magnus lost game, and then he tweeted again, and it brought sort of the anti-cheating discussion a little bit up to life again. By no means to the same extent as during the Niemann case, but even so, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And I will be accused of being a Magnus fanboy, but I think firstly he was very clear in his language in that he said, "This is not to accuse my opponent of anything who played an amazing game and deserved to win. But honestly, as soon as I saw my opponent was wearing a watch early in the game, I lost my ability to concentrate." Now, I think he's very clear here that he isn't making an accusation of cheating. He is, talking about the way it's affected him personally, and it's, he's definitely blaming himself, and he's saying that this is his problem. And I think it's, along with the fact that I think he's kind of correct in what he said, I also think that it's a really good thing for the chess world that Magnus is quite honest about things, because I think that's like Magnus interviews are always worth watching because he is very honest, and he definitely says what he thinks, and it's not just bland things. Oh yeah, we played a game of chess. It was we both had chances, and then I managed to win, and hopefully I'll do the same again tomorrow. And these interviews are not very interesting. So I think it's a good thing that he's honest. He speaks his mind, and I think he has a point here. I think it's very difficult to concentrate when this specter of cheating is over your head.
Well, first, I should also declare most people know, but I'm employed by Magnus, so I'm obviously incredibly.
I am not employed by Magnus. I want to make that clear. I don't owe him anything.
I do. I'm sorry. The livelihood of my family. So I have a slight conflict of interest here. But now you know at least. I think it's a good point that Magnus is always being very honest. I was trying to fight, that fight for quite a while about the candidates tournaments because, no, sorry, the World Championship match. No one believed that Magnus would not defend his title, and I kept referring to he's actually just speaking his mind, and that didn't get through. And of course, there is a part of this. For instance, Norwegian Jon Ludvig Hammer was tweeting that, sure, Magnus is tweeting that. He's probably saying what he says, but he should also realize that people might interpret it in a different way. I agree with you fully. He's speaking his mind, and he's not at all accusing the opponent of cheating. And I think it's very real, this thing that you might get paranoid. I mean, if there is no, if you don't feel fully confident in let's say the police, you will start feeling some kind of insecurity, and especially during a competitive situation. Well, I have not spoken one word with Magnus about this, so I'm talking about my own sort of feelings during my career. But of course, when you're under pressure, things are not going extremely well, you might you know go into some kind of negative thought process. And of course, someone, by perhaps accident, not following the rules, the organizers not enforcing them, people walking around with mobile phones in the playing hall, of course it's going to get on your nerves. And well, I think Magnus said that in the following tweet, that that's his own responsibility to battle these emotions. But well, ideally we shouldn't get to that stage, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's the paranoia angle is a big problem in chess at the moment. And I think it's maybe the biggest aspect of cheating, because I'm still not fully convinced that cheating is absolutely rife in the chess world, but I am convinced that suspicions of cheating are absolutely rife. And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel it is just in general amongst the top players at the moment? What do you feel like the sentiment is?
Problem is, I'm kind of out of the loop in the sense that I'm mainly, interacting with Magnus. I go to not that many tournaments, so I mean, I honestly don't know what the top 10 thinks about it. But of course, well, you do hear things here and then. I think even Caruana spoke it quite openly on a rivaling podcast, right? That he,
We're already calling them rivals.
yeah. We should at least show off our some ambition here, right? But he was talking about,
Mhm.
was it 50%? He was giving a number of things like this. But no, of course, there has been situations where someone is insinuating this player, that player, and while a lot of it could be, completely nonsense, the suspicions are always there. Also, I'm not really the right one to ask. I remember that. Well, back in the days when Fella was accused of cheating, I was playing the European Championship. There was a lot of talks about Fella in that tournament. I think someone went to Danilov, who was the president of the European Chess Federation at the time. He said that, well, these games to me look like a very promising young player. And, well, there will be a lot of talk and no evidence, and it's very hard to do something. But of course, I mean, the paranoia creeps in and it becomes, well, very, very damaging. So that's basically when I keep mentioning that if we don't trust the police, it means that, well, we don't trust that someone who is cheating will necessarily be caught, or there will be very efficient measures against it. And that, of course, creates paranoia. And I agree with you that, well, this suspicion is very bad. I mean, if we had one cheater, the person was caught, and then that was it. I don't know how big a case that was. We had it with Rouses, of course, on a slightly lower level. But of course, this suspicion thing is bad. Also, perhaps in the beginning, it's not a huge issue. I remember maybe the 2013 candidates, I was just becoming Magnus's coach. I mean, there was some kind of anti-cheating measures, but I think Aronian was joking that, yeah, they check us once and that's it. And basically, well, we can just go to the toilet, like he was referring to The Godfather, you can hide the gun, well, in this case, the mobile phone in the toilet, and that more or less it. And I think the feeling among the players was that, okay, we know each other for so long time. We have a very good feeling of the strength level of our opponents. I mean, that's very
Mhm.
comfortable to. Is this as players you played for a long time before cheating was, a relevant factor, and this is somehow becoming much more blurry now because you're playing a lot of players you have no clue about who is, and you cannot judge their strength. And then, well, that is very legitimate. It's very logical. I mean, people grow old, young talents comes, but this makes the problematics much more difficult in a way. And no, this paranoia seems to have crept in, and I'm sure there is top players who genuinely think that a lot of people is cheating online. Well, Caruana says, I haven't listened to our rivaling podcast, but I saw the tweet, right? So there's people who are
Mhm.
genuinely convinced, and if it's true these people are cheating or not, well, it doesn't really matter in terms of damage. That's what you're saying, and I kind of agree with that, right?
Yeah, and I think what you raise is a really interesting point, that this is kind of the first generation that's now at the kind of, not exactly the end of their careers, but we're heading into the
I
teenagers are
hope I
very
hope not.
dangerous at
Yeah.
least. Whereas if you take the previous generation as Vichy, when Magnus took over from Vichy, like rating wise, I guess was like 2010,
Something like that,
11.
yeah.
So although engines were definitely much stronger than humans already, I don't think there was as much fear about the
Yeah.
technology to hide things,
Just to jump in, but I was
as
actually
easily.
Vichy's second in the World Championship in 2005, where Vichy was the favorite,
Hmm.
but Topalov won. It was not like a huge sensation in any way. But there a lot of debate if Topalov was cheating during the games. I mean, there was basically allegations. I know that there were persons who thought that it was extremely likely, or they felt it was for sure they were doing it. I think Morozevich was making, maybe he was nominating Ripke or Danilov as Player of the Year or something like that. I mean, again, I don't really think it was the case, but the suspicions was there already. For instance, one argument was that, I mean, Topalov was always sitting on the same chair while everybody else was rotating, so it was easier to make signals like that. And
yeah, but that's kind of the point. Is that even back then, although there was suspicions and accusations, the suspicion was based around
yeah,
Danilov
of course.
communicating with Topalov. Whereas nowadays, we don't really think so much that an accomplice is necessary, or if there is an accomplice, it's someone who doesn't need to be in the
Mm-hmm.
room. It's that kind of thing. Whereas technology is much better nowadays, because the kind of previous cases of like passing signals were, I think, a bit more primitive, and these things could still happen, but I think it's less what Magnus talked about the
Mm-hmm.
watch. He found that very distracting, and I think that's kind of more the things that are worrying the players at the moment. I think it is important to just remove those barriers. I think top tournaments, especially something with the kind of prize money that Qatar Masters had, which for a lot of players is like life changing money. For it was Yakubayev who ended up winning that. I would be very surprised if he's had that kind of
I think
prize
he
money
won the
in
Olympiad
any
and got
tournament.
a pretty huge bonus, right?
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
mean,
okay. Yeah,
I
but
get your
that
point in
was
general. Of course,
unusual. Yeah.
I mean, take a yearly salary in Uzbekistan, it's considerably lower. Obviously, I mean, it's life changing, as you said. Also, career wise, perhaps not fully, but it could be qualification for a lot of tournaments, so on and so forth. Obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the next generation is starting to get kind of naturally overtaken by the teenagers, and yeah, they have this specter overlooking that. And I do think it is a lot of the top players that are. I was looking through the list of people who have never been accused of cheating or accused someone else of cheating, and there's not that many on the out of the top players.
Okay.
I think some of them have been accused by others, and some of them have made accusations themselves. But I would say they're in the majority if you add those two groups together. Which is not clear if there's a huge problem with cheating, but to me, it is clear that there's a lot of suspicions, and I think tournament organizers do have to be stricter. I think there needs to be better controls. I think with online chess, it's always going to be difficult without someone physically in the room. But I think, there's for the top events, these kind of hybrid events can work out reasonably well. And I think they look kind of good, when they had people in the Oslo studio before playing chess together. I thought that was kind of good. And they had arbiters. The players who weren't at the venue, they had to have an arbiter at their house or wherever they were playing from. People can play from the St. Louis
Yeah,
chess
yeah.
club, for example. Because there's a bunch of top
That
players kind
solve
of
is
live
at
in
the
that area.
absolute top, but that's maybe also a huge start already, right? If we can have full integrity there. It's a good point you mentioned that basically everyone has been involved either in being accused or being part of accusing to a certain extent, right? I cannot remember Ding being on either side there, but
Ding was the one outlier
yeah,
that
yeah.
I was
He's
thinking
an
of, but
outlier in
yeah,
many ways. Our reigning world champ. Are we getting to the technological stage where you think it can actually be a one man operation?
I think it's possible. I think it's still difficult, but I've seen things that make me think that it's doable. Whether anyone has actually done it is really not clear, because I think that you need to have very specific skills. You probably, looking at the kind of the way the chess world is, you would probably need to hire someone to build it for you, some kind of device. I think I would be very surprised if any 2700-ish player has those kind of skills to build something themselves and then makes the jump to 2800, because I think it's still, you can't, like, this isn't the kind of thing that's going to be a beginner becomes super grandmaster. It's never I don't think we're really concerned about that at the moment. I think it's more, maybe a decent grandmaster becomes one of the best players in the world overnight, and that's
Yeah, or like Tour de France, or there was Sochi Olympiad and so on and so forth, where at the absolute elite level you decide to tweak things in your favor, right? I mean, well, you sound like you cannot go down to the shop, pay €100, and then you get the equipment. But if we talk about let's say the level of intelligence services, I mean, I don't know if they would be capable of doing it extremely easily in a way. I mean, in World Championship matches, I think basically, I mean, we decided that okay, if someone with the resources wants to, well, break into our communication system, they are gonna manage. I mean, one thing is hacking our emails, but also, I mean, entering some person's flat or whatever is not it's not impossible if you have sufficient will and resources, right? Um, yeah.
okay. So we've lured people in with very exciting cheating talk about Magnus. Now it's time for your FIDE segment, the true FIDE segment. What have FIDE been up to this week?
Oh, they have been up to a lot of stuff. I mean, but there's been so many things since the last time. The thing I'm paying most personally attention to, but it's not spoken about that much, is the FIDE sponsor, Timur Turlev and his company Freedom Holding. Chess.com, but Taya Swenson did an article on it maybe like a week ago. That I forgot, maybe it was CBS, I don't know the abbreviation, but one of the bigger US networks actually wrote an article about that. The company is now being researched by the US authorities. I mean, Turlov is the big FIDE sponsor with Freedom Holding. They sponsored the World Championship match. The recent match was played in Kazakhstan, so was the previous Rapid and Blitz, if I remember correctly. But his company is sort of on the stock exchange of Nasdaq in the US, so that's why it's registered there. And now there is sort of apparently some kind of research being done by the US authorities. That happens to a lot of companies, as far as I can understand. So it's not extremely dramatic, perhaps, but I think maybe in April and then later in August, two sort of private research companies came out with reports where they said there is a lot of troubles there, that it could be certain things could be fake, they could be breaking sanctions, and so on and so forth. And what both these private companies were saying is that we have taken up a considerable short position, meaning that they are making a financial bet that the stock is going to fall. Immediately after they did that, the stock went up a lot. And again, that can be seen as trust among the investors, but Turlov himself owns 70% of the stock. So again, those who is sort of believing in the conspiracies are saying, well, that can easily happen. Since then, the stock has been falling to, I mean, like 75, where it was 100 at max. And there is things brewing there. It's interesting what this kind of research is leading to, and that could actually have big implications for FIDE. Partly because, well, I mean, some are suggesting that the company could fold, and then at least FIDE would lose a sponsor, but also it would have huge reputational damage if it turns out that he's actually is kind of a fraud. And again, I have no reasons to say that, except I'm pointing to two independent reports suggesting that. So that is, I think, a huge case that basically only, it seems like me in the chess world who's been caring about it, I tweeted a bit, but now chess.com has actually made an article about it. But I think it's a good example of that we're not really dealing with these things internally in the chess world. I think there's no one in FIDE who has cared one bit is this a legitimate company, or they haven't done proper research into it. But things externally can suddenly jump into our world and overrule it in a way. Most likely they will not. But I mean, this is kind of a big case that, in my opinion, is no one really cares about. Probably because it's rather complicated, and it's way too complicated for me. But it could certainly have rather big implications, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess it is definitely very complex.
Extremely.
To understand kind of what's actually happening there. And also, I suspect that even if they go bust, FIDE will just say, or Emil will just say, "Okay, we didn't see this coming. No one could have possibly predicted this. We're working hard to find new sponsors, and they'll find someone with a very similar business model who will probably
You are
replace."
probably right in a way that it will not trigger a huge event, sort of trigger huge turmoil internally in FIDE, and you can argue that, well, they cashed in the money, so what's the big deal? They will cash in somewhere else in a way. Maybe it's only me who thinks it will do reputational damage, and I don't really think that much of the reputation anyway. You could say, but well, they have to finance things from somewhere, right? And we saw that from 2021, basically from Djokovic was elected, there was a huge number of Russian state sponsorships. After February 24th, it went to Turlov and others. And should that avenue sort of also close down, well, they will have to come up with new things to some extent. But of course, India is booming. We have a Chinese world champion. There is obviously avenues to go at. I would say the next candidates tournament is going to happen in Canada with a sponsor, as far as I understand. No connection to Russia at all. More rather poker, correctly, right? Or
Who's
I,
the? Oh, it's the Scheinberg
Scheinberg family,
family.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
and
right?
they are basically
Yeah, they're also sponsor
yeah,
the
yeah.
Grand
I mean, they
Swiss. Yeah,
have been there. They have, well, they sponsor maybe the Grand Swiss, and also they were sponsoring the candidates tournament, right? So the previous candidates
yeah. Mhm.
tournament. So I mean, it's not sort of fundamental in any way, but for the feed the machinery to run, there has to be income, obviously, in a way. And I don't think we have that many big sponsors. I would say.
No, they definitely do a lot of big events, and I think they actually own hotels as well, if I remember correctly. Because I think maybe the Marriott Hotel or something like that. I think they have on one of the
Yeah,
big
yeah, yeah.
chains. So
That could be.
yeah, I mean, I have some sympathy with FIDE for it's difficult to get sponsors, but I think they're kind of stuck in this cycle of they go to sponsors who have clear connections to Russia in one way or another, and that to some extent is going to scare off other sponsors. I don't know to what extent. I don't know if big Western companies would be interested in sponsoring FIDE with their track record anyway. But I feel like chess is big enough at the moment that there should be some interest, and with the Champions Chess Tour comfortably attracting
Mhm.
pretty big sponsors like Puma, companies like that. It does feel like chess is big enough, and I think in general, like sponsors care less about the organization than the game that they're
Mhm.
involved with. So if chess has a decent reputation, and I think it does, I think it should be a reasonable prospect for big companies. And yeah, it depends how those conversations go. If they are approaching FIDE or FIDE are approaching other big companies, I have no idea. But there does seem to be a tendency to get money from one direction and maybe get lucky somewhere else. But
I don't know how it works in a way. At some point, well, you could also make the argument that FIDE didn't seem too interested in changing. I mean, with Djokovic as president, it would be obvious to do it how they did until at least 2022, right? But you're
Mhm.
sort of from the outside world of chess, at least until recently. I mean, well, I think we have just got used to it. But for me, it's always been strange that, for instance, when Magnus became world champion, I thought, okay, world championship matches, by any kind of logic, shouldn't the prize fund go up? I mean, you would have great sponsorships because of his sort of attraction for the Western market, for the media attention. The first match was good in 2013 in Chennai with Vichy, but that was basically Vichy, pulling up the sponsor himself in Chennai, who had a great prize fund. The next one was done for minimum for 1 million. And, it's a lot of money, but it's not 2 point whatever it was in Chennai and what it was earlier. I think, for instance, Gelfand against Vichy in 2012. And of course, especially Vichy against Topalov had considerably higher prize funds than Magnus against Caruana. And that is odd if you look at it from a market perspective, at least. And no, I don't know. It's hard for me to understand. While, for instance, Norway could not easily bring up that kind of funds, for instance, or US or stuff like that. I mean, for instance, Caruana against Magnus. Well, St. Louis, Rex Sinkerfield, isn't it? I mean, isn't it? Wouldn't it have been easy for him?
Yeah, I don't know why there hasn't been a match in St. Louis, but I did see Rex actually speaking about this last week, and he said, it's his dream to have a world championship match in St. Louis.
Okay.
So yeah, but I don't know. My impression is that they don't have a brilliant relationship with
No.
FIDE because there has been no big. It's such a natural venue for the candidates. Never mind the match. Just like why hasn't there been a candidates there? Because they have this incredible club.
Yeah.
They have they're set up to do these top level events all the time, and yeah, there basically hasn't been. I don't think there's been any official
Hmm.
FIDE events at St. Louis. So to me, that says there's probably not a great relationship with FIDE. Which you would think FIDE would be doing everything in their power to repair that because St. Louis, other than there has been some questions about things they've done over the last couple of years. I think in general they've been such a big benefit to the chess world in terms of the number of top tournaments that have appeared around there, and not just top events. They have
Yeah.
these St. Louis winter and spring and summer round robins for 26 to 2700 players. So yeah, it does. It's interesting that there hasn't been a match there, but yeah, it does seem that that's something that Rex wants. So
I mean,
I don't know why it
I
hasn't
would
happened.
speculate that, well, Rex would be happy to pay off the players and host the event and such, but that comes with you know, a circus on the side. Also, there has to be percentages to feed. Earlier, it was perhaps 20%. Maybe now it has been changed structurally. I'm not fully into it. I think when they published the overall budget for a world championship match is obviously considerably bigger than the actual prize fund. So, of course, there could be
Hmm.
complications like that. You can also argue that, I mean, for instance, look at FIFA and such. When they delegate a world championship somewhere, is it purely a financial decision? Is it purely a decision of what's best for chess, or is it also an internal political decision? It could be a lot of each things. I think, to be fair, it's likely
Yeah.
that FIDE would say Rex have never bid for a world championship, and well, also he was running against Shinov, or not directly, but running on Kasparov's board, if I remember correctly, right, and such. But of course, it is somewhat strange that St. Louis has not done that, and I agree with you that, well, while it's a different debate, but for instance, now we have the Grand Swiss, which was earlier the Isle of Man, so there's some overlap there. St. Louis appeared out of nowhere and just became a huge addition to the chess world. I mean, the subject of what went wrong there, we will actually have a separate part on later, or something similar within this episode. But of course, in
Hmm.
general, St. Louis has been a huge asset. I mean, well, it's provided a livelihood for a bunch of chess players. It's created a lot of chess events, and I agree with their financial situation, with the framework they have. Not having a candidates tournament, I haven't thought about that, is kind of weird in some way. And of course, World Championship match, especially Magnus Carana, would have been very obvious there.
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder if maybe Caruana didn't want it there because sometimes the players don't like to play at home. Magnus has never been too keen on playing a match in Norway, as far as I understand, because there's you do have the extra circus around you, and it's a bit of a distraction. But yeah, it does seem like just such a
Yeah.
natural place to have a
I
world
doubt he
championship
would have
match.
been against it, to be honest. Also, it would be strange. I mean, he would get time zone advantage and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure. I just thought maybe it would play a part. I doubt he would, be a hard no against it and just like, no, this is totally unacceptable. But yeah, maybe he wasn't super keen on
No,
that match
uh,
being there. And
it's possible, but that I actually kind of doubt. Of course, well, it could be Magnus also who thought, okay, why should I play on his home turf and such? But I think
hmm
also,
yeah,
well, back in the days, there was some kind of bidding process for the kind of things, and how it was working, I don't know. I think, for instance, for one of Vichy's matches, well, I have absolutely no proof, or I was not even saying any kind of source that sort of would direct it. But I think for some match there was like three bids, but two of them could be not that sincere, but were basically made to push up the third bid in a way. So having these kind of
Uh-huh.
processes where people can bid in due time would be a good thing. I understand FIDE do have bidding procedures, but they are typically announced a bit out of the blue and sort of with a rather short time limit. So I think there's a much bigger debate behind the scenes than there is a public procedure where you can submit bids in due time and you know in advance that, okay, there is this 2 years to do it. Of course, for World Championship matches, I guess also knowing the players matters a considerable part of it, right? And if you have to bid before the players are known, it becomes, you know, awkward to some extent. So maybe that's what it ends up as it does.
Yeah, possibly. But then, the match should be serious enough that it doesn't really matter who the
Yeah,
players are.
I remember the match in London as a rather big success. There was considerable amount of press there and such, but it puzzles me that with that kind of attention, and I would say especially World Championship matches has an extremely strong brand. It's followed well basically worldwide in mass media. This is really an event that pops out of the chess news. It's just mainstream media news, right? That the
Yeah.
sponsorship deals are not
It's
not bigger.
the only
Yeah,
chess event that makes global
I
news.
mean,
Like, other than
yeah,
like
yeah,
cheating
yeah, of
and
course.
sexism and things like that, but like it's the only event that makes international news purely for
I mean,
the reasons
an
of chess.
Olympiad must be insanely more expensive, but of course, in terms of media coverage and sponsor value, I would assume it's less valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Olympiads are definitely a big deal in the country that they're in, and it'll definitely make national news. But international news, I would be surprised, unless one of the countries does particularly well.
Yeah,
Their
yeah.
country will do coverage, but like I doubt there was U.S. coverage of Uzbekistan winning the Olympiad in India,
No.
for example. Like,
Uh,
I'm sure India and Uzbekistan covered it very well, but yeah, it's, the match is special, and
mm.
it
And also, I mean,
should be treated
I
special.
don't know, but we seem to have a chess boom to some extent. I mean, at least if you look at chess.com numbers, if you look at streamers' numbers and things like this, right? In Gotham Chess,
Hmm.
Agama the Tour, and such, it seems to be booming in quite a way. And I would be surprised if there shouldn't be some kind of spillover effect, but I think we are lacking this sort of chess sponsorships. Doesn't seem extremely linked to market value in that sense. It's more like, well, our sponsors. I mean, doesn't really seem to sell a product, right? It doesn't strike me as obvious that the last sponsor for the World Championship match was sponsoring it in order to sell more products, for instance. That's true.
Yeah, and I think in general, like the players that get sponsorship, they tend to do their sponsorships tend to be more logical. Like, I think a few players have sponsors by like tech
Yeah,
companies, for example, and to me, that's a very natural fit. Chess has a very clear connection with technology in general, so you can broadly expand that to basically any tech company. It makes sense for them to have a top chess player as one of their ambassadors.
well,
So I think in general the players do
Well,
pretty well with
Magnus is
stuff like that.
Puma and betting, and well, you can like betting or not, but well, Puma and Unibet they're dealing with Magnus because they think it's a good business for them, right? I mean, they get exposed both.
Yeah, and also I think if you treat chess as a sport, then Magnus is definitely the first person you should think of,
Yeah.
because I think
Well, so was Kasparov in
he
his days
definitely
and such, right? But well, you're saying that others also get quite some sponsor deals, right? I think even some of the young Indian players, maybe it was Erigaisi who got a
yeah.
incredible sponsor deal, right? And
Yeah, he had a very. I think it was over $1 million, maybe one point
yeah,
five
yeah,
million. Maybe, I think it was over
yeah.
3 years
Well,
or so. But no, that was a very good. I think that was a
yeah,
tech
exactly. No,
company.
no, I was
As far
just,
as
and I think Karana and Geary and such also have quite some sponsor deals. But well, we are describing them as logical sponsor deals. That's the phrase you are using, right? Simply, it makes sense, and you can explain it very well in a very easily understandable manner, right?
yeah, yeah. Do we have anything else to talk about? Because we've gone
Oh,
over, and we've got a very
yeah.
important interview coming
Actually,
up
no, I
next.
think we can end it here. But please hang on for the interview here. We're gonna have. Uh, Mr. Dodgy is gonna, well, he's gonna be there, but we have a special guest who will tell us about which kind of foundation she's created,
Yeah.
and we're very thankful for that.
So So, in interests of full transparency, we've started with the nepotism in the very first episode. I've brought my friend and co-founder of the Women in Chess Foundation on, Emilia Castelao, to talk about how are we going to save all of the women in chess. So, don't leave until after the interview.
See you
We'll be
at
right
some
back.
point again, hopefully. Welcome to the interview segment here. Today we're going to talk about a new thing in chess called the Women in Chess Foundation. And well, we have Mr. Dodgy here, but he's actually now becoming Michael Duke because he's one of the founders. But especially welcome to Emilio Castelao because you are the founder and leader of this federation. So, well, congratulations with getting it up and running, and perhaps tell us about it.
Thanks. Yeah, so when Jen's story came out in around February, March, Michael and I were very, upset about what happened and angry, and we had many long Google meeting calls about, what actually could we do to change things in chess that would get, everyday chess players involved. And so we kind of came up with the Women in Chess Foundation. I actually can't remember what came first, if it was the advocacy program or if it was the Women in Chess Foundation, but essentially one of our main kind of initiatives is we want to have independent advocates at every single chess tournament, which will obviously take many years. This is a long-term project for us, but we hope that with the advocates, people will have kind of a third person to turn to um, allow them to report anything if necessary and find that support in the chess community. We're also working on, safe play guideline reform with clubs and federations, as well as marketing women's chess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Well, I think let's go into the details of sort of the actual things you have in your program. But I mean, you were saying that it was Jennifer Shahar thing that triggered it. Well, what exactly triggered it there? I understand it's grueling in many ways, but what exactly is it that you see that's very wrong there, and how can the initiative you're gonna present help it?
Okay, so with the Jennifer Shahade story incident, which involved Alejandro Ramirez, where he was accused of sexual harassment and misconduct over a long period of time with a lot of different women, and Jen was the first person to come forward. For those of the two people who are listening that maybe don't know, there's a few things about that whole story that we found particularly disturbing, and one of the things is that Jen was almost uniquely well placed in the chess world to be able to deal with these kind of things. She's a very prominent player and commentator. She's very well known. She's very well connected in US chess in particular. She knows everyone, and everyone knows her. And she's someone with a tremendous amount of respect in the community. People. She's very well respected as a player and an author, and she's done everything at chess. And she went to the Wall Street Journal, and she was respectable enough for the Wall Street Journal to say, okay, this is someone that we should listen to. And they published the story, and everything came up, and then kind of nothing happened. And she'd made complaints in the past to St. Louis Chess Club and US Chess, and it turned out that they hadn't really taken action at all. Maybe there was some investigation started, but it didn't seem like they were particularly serious about them. And the thing that I found particularly disturbing about that is that if that could happen to someone who's basically at the top of the chess world, she knows everybody. What would happen to like a 17-year-old girl who's an amateur chess player who accused the same person? Because people are just not going to listen to her. And it felt to me and Emilia that we clearly needed a new organization that was focused on supporting, survivors of this kind of misconduct. because it didn't seem like the institutions, particularly in US chess, US chess in St. Louis didn't seem very interested in dealing with it, and it's highly unlikely that FIDE were going to take any proactive steps to deal with something like this because they still haven't concerned themselves with Ramirez in any way.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I guess, well, to sort of play the devil's advocate, I mean, well, one could go to the police. My impression was that some of the things was very much up on that scale. Are you talking about scales that are not, sort of, let's say, cases that shouldn't be taken to the police, but that the chess world should actually deal with by themselves? And also, how is it in other sports, is your impression, compared to chess? Are they facing similar problems, or why are chess so different? Is it because of the gender balance, for instance, and such?
In terms of these cases, you have to understand that like a young girl who is experiencing this feels very alone in the world when this happens and may not feel comfortable enough to go to the police themselves. And one thing that we really wanted was for this to be accessible kind of for everyone. And I think that it's not a revolutionary idea. It's something that happens advocacy all the time in like advocates that go with children to court, medical advocates who assist survivors of sexual assault like at the hospital while they're getting their medical checks done. And when I was in undergrad, we had a sort of similar issue where it was a male dominated world and you had kind of bullying and harassment going on that sometimes obviously there are things that need to be reported to the police that should be reported to the police, but oftentimes they don't because we have a culture not only in chess but I think around the world internationally where things like this aren't necessarily taken seriously. Um, but also at the same time, you have some things that like bullying that doesn't necessarily like needs to be addressed by the police. So it's more kind of a way for people to like find support and resources because when I was doing research for this and looking at all of the national federations that have reporting systems and was just going kind of through the map, a lot of this information is super inaccessible and it took me many PDF documents and clicking on kind of random links to find even ways to report it to national federations. And so it's um it's a very kind of complicated situation and it's not necessarily about like addressing the cases themselves, but having people who are supportive of others and kind of helping them find and make decisions about what they want to do.
But basically, you are saying that there is, I don't know, a hole in the system or something like this. That, well, when you are abused, bullied, or anything like this, there is no reasonable safe space where people could go to. Is that understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I think there's a huge gap and void in the system where you don't have kind of those resources. I mean, for other sports, I was looking at like the International Olympic Committee and tennis, and they have like very clear ways to kind of report these incidents, especially I think after uh, the story of the coach of the gymnast. I can't recall his name right now, but I think after that story came out, there was huge like institutional changes, and institutions like the International Olympic Committee adopted these things, and they have a whole report published on their website about how to implement reporting mechanisms at the local level for local sports. And so, but you did not see FIDE, the institution that probably should theoretically be, changing these things, do anything. And so we decided to do something.
And well, for instance, well, FIDE does have a, let's say, women in chess commission, but perhaps that's not exactly for this in a way. I mean, that you are doing it sort of, let's say, outside the FIDE, outside any kind of established organization. Is it to be fully independent, which you think will sort of create protection for the individuals, or is it just distrust in these organizations, for instance?
There's definitely a combination of the two, but I think even if there wasn't any distrust of the institutions that we currently have, I think it's important to be independent for a project like this. I think it's like currently there are issues with the leadership of certain organizations, but even if there wasn't, like the chess world is so small that there's always going to be issues where you might have a reason to report someone, and the only person you can report to is that person's friend. Which could often be the case. It's not. This isn't a specific thing about FIDE or any federation, but it's the chess world is very very small like that, and that this can also apply for tournaments. Tournament organizers are often very friendly with the top players that turn up at their tournaments for good reason. They want them to play at their tournaments. They become friends with them. They hang out with them every year. It's good, but also if there's a report of misconduct at a tournament and it's one of the players who the tournament organizer really really likes, it's going to be difficult to go directly to the organizer and say, look, this guy has done something wrong.
There's
So
going
it
to be
has to be an independent organization.
I'm sure there's been cases in the past where there is this strong incentive to hush it down in a way. I think also it's you, Michael, who is on the web pages mentioning that things are being swept under the rug. I mean, you mentioned this Jennifer Shahade and Ramirez case as the one triggering it for you. But well, that's a very sort of, let's say, grave case in a way. But is it your impression that there is a lot of stuff being swept under the rug? Is that sort of also why you're pushing it? You might have knowledge of that, or what is your general feeling on such?
Yeah, I think every incident that was mentioned a lot, like, and the Jen, we keep going back to Jen, but Jen also talked about other people who were affected by Alejandro's behavior, and there's a wide range of behavior, some of which was maybe kind of fairly minor, and some of it was extremely serious. And I think every single incident that was mentioned in that kind of whole story, uh, the rate of underreporting for every single one of them is huge. Like, you could easily say 10 times as many stories exist in the chess world and they're simply not reported. And the reason for that is there are consequences for reporting and there are consequences for speaking up. And
Like what? Can you example? What does that mean?
well, I don't recall the last time Jen was a commentator at St. Louis Chess Club. She recently left US Chess under not great terms going by the discussions online, and I don't want.
No,
I
fair
don't
enough.
know
But you,
exactly what the kind of circumstances that led to her leaving were, but I don't think she was treated particularly well by them.
mhm,
And with another case that came out recently with Sabrina
yeah,
Chavanez, within several days of her posting tweets about someone that she didn't name, she was threatened with legal action.
mhm.
Um, and the consequences for the people who have perpetrated things have been pretty minimal so far. So I think it's very clear that there's a danger to speaking out, and I think uh, it's not the way the chess world is at the moment. There's no big institution that will protect women who speak out
Yeah.
Until now, yeah. Oh, sorry.
until now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to add on to that, I think coming from a perspective where like I'm obviously fairly new in the chess world, like being really in it for only about a year, like one of the first things that, I'm told when I go to chess tournaments and make friends with people is the kind of like open secrets that exist about certain people, and like this is something that I think happens kind of quite often is the sharing of these like open secrets. And I think that by having that kind of culture and lack of accountability, like we very much needed an independent organization to kind of not necessarily um I guess like I don't want to say like police those open secrets, but like it's important for people to have a place to go where they can talk about what's going on in a safe space and take action should they want to. So,
But do you think chess is different from, let's say, the real world there? I'm sorry, I've spent all my life in the chess world, so I honestly don't know. But you were both, I mean, you were both rather new in this world. It actually struck you as being markedly different than elsewhere, or you think it's a general problem? I mean, Me Too has happened in a bunch of places, and for instance, in Danish politics, as far as I know, there has been some open secrets that perhaps only collapsed much later than there were open secrets. I mean, do you think the chess world is very different?
I would say it's not clear that chess players are necessarily worse than the general population. I've seen some
Thanks.
people say that they are, and I've seen, particularly, I've seen a couple of people coming from like the esports world that have said chess is by far the most toxic game they've ever been involved with, which I think is quite striking considering the reputation that a lot of online games have. But regardless of whether chess players are worse or not than the general population, I think it's very clear that the abuses that happen in the chess world are focused on a much smaller group of women. So if
Mhm.
you know the rate of sexual harassment in the general population is just as a completely random number,
mhm.
let's say it's 5%, that will be spread in the general population between 50% of women. Whereas in the chess world, there are far fewer women. This 5% is focused
Of
on
course.
15% of women. So I think for the women in chess, it's clearly far worse.
So you're basically saying on the individual level, simply because of the math situation with, let's say, 10% of the players being women, it gets so much worse. While, I mean, take a random chess player, he will behave as well as anybody, but it becomes a bigger problem simply because of the gender balance we have, as far as I understand, right?
And
Yeah,
I think it
that's
becomes, sorry, go ahead.
no. I was going to say, yeah, I agree. That's
Uh,
my suspicion, but
mhm.
we don't know for sure. But yeah, continue.
Well, I think that it's chess is very different as well because they have no processes in place to deal with this kind of situation. Like when I went to university, one thing that they schooled us on, and I went to a Catholic university as well, so you have to kind of take into consideration uh, like how Catholics believe about, premarital sex and kind of sexual harassment and assault and all of that. But like my university had a program where if women felt unsafe at night, you could call someone and they would happily walk you back to your dorm. We have Title IX, which was a huge legislation that really kind of improved reporting mechanisms for women in instances like of abuse. And so in the real world, there's actually ways for women to report these things and have them be taken seriously. And in chess, that's just not the case given the institutions that exist and kind of the nicheness of chess as a sport. And like, we technically don't qualify to be scrutinized by the International Olympic Committee, even though we were a part of the esport Olympics. It's just not something that they um, like want to deal with or not want to deal with, but that they said they don't deal with it because I've asked. And so it's like we live in this gray area, which makes when things like happen when things like this happen in chess, I think much worse because there's no way to deal with it or to kind of fix the problem.
Hmm. But well, now you are making this. But do you think you can actually make a difference? I mean, well, I mean, you say that it will, if someone, turns someone in, it will have consequences for that person. Uh, wouldn't that still be the case? I mean, well, how can you make a big difference. I mean, you don't have sanctions. You cannot ban people or things like that. I understand that you can be helpful and be supportive, but is that really going to change the dynamics?
In the short term, probably not. Although it will definitely help the people, the survivors. But also, we are going to be working with federations, and we've already started this on updating their safe play policies and the sanctions that are attached to those policies. I think there is a very wide and inconsistent range of policies within the chess world that vary massively from federation to federation. Some federations have excellent policies with clear sanctions and they follow through them. And I think the Norwegian Federation is a pretty decent example of that. Some federations have really good policies that they don't apply. And, there's a couple of them that they clearly need some help in, following through on the things that they've already done and not, hiding behind the fact that they have good policies, but they're not willing to attach them to sanctions or enforce them. And there's also a lot of still federations that basically have no policies and no clear reporting mechanisms and no way to sanction things. I mean, I actually don't know what FIDE's official policy would be on just sexual harassment. Like, I don't know what kind of sanctions there would be, and I don't think the ethics committee has really ever dealt with a case like that. And I've read more ethics cases than a healthy person, and I don't recall reading one about sexual harassment, which is very strange. But it can't. There isn't just one solution to this problem. Like, it's the advocacy program. I think is a huge step forward, and it's definitely something that the chess world needs. But on its own, it needs a lot of support, and making sure that federations have like real policies that they can follow through on is another part of that.
Yeah. But also as an institution, like we have the advocacy program and we're not just letting advocates like run free after training. Like we have an oversight process on how advocates have to kind of act when they, receive a survivor in their case and how to kind of let us know what they're up to and make sure that not one advocate has too many cases and so on and so forth. But like with that information that we receive from the oversight process, we are able to kind of like track trends and keep clubs and federations accountable. So if we see that, a club in England has multiple reports against someone and we see that kind of in the oversight process, we can reach out to that club and be like, hey, we've gotten kind of multiple instances of, you know, someone at your tournament or club committing misconduct. Like, we are obviously keeping an eye on you. You need to address this, go through some sort of process, kind of in a compliance manner. We're obviously not a reporting agency. We can't ever make like reports on behalf of people, but we do eventually want to have like impact reports that showcase with anonymized information, like if there are cases that go unreported, just so that the chess world can like get a sense of how much this actually happens that they don't see of that women may not speak out publicly, but while still protecting kind of the women that do come to us.
But is there, I mean, it almost sounds like, well, you have this idea that if in a certain region, or you mention a certain club, you have multiple reports, then, well, statistics starts to matter a lot. Are you even seeing it to that extent, or is it more to have a general idea of the overall picture?
I think it's just to have a general idea of the overall picture. Um, and, people can do with that information what they will. I just think that there's a really big disconnect between, um, we hear these stories online and then the news cycle happens and, we get another story and uh, the story just keep coming, but we don't really see kind of the bigger picture of how things are. And a lot of the stories, are very Eurocentric and either American or Europe. And this could be happening in other places that we might not hear about. And so it's important to have kind of that bigger picture.
No, on that sentence you say Eurocentric. When I look at your leadership, me including here as an interviewer, it's very, I would say, European, perhaps or Western. One could argue. I mean, if you look at it from FIDE's perspective, are you sure that on a global level it's seen as a problem? That this is not. I mean, this Me Too movement is generally a Western phenomenon, as I see it. And take India, China, Russia. Does it matter to them at all? Do you see yourself as a global movement? Is this a global problem, or are you trying to solve a very important yet regional problem?
Well,
Yeah, so
first of all, we have people on the board from 4 different continents. I checked today, so we've got 4 out of 5. We're not there yet, but no, it's we're definitely, to start off with, due to the proximity of us both living in Europe and having connections in Europe, it's clearly much easier to talk to the people that are around you. But we do have one of the Ageline on the board is from Argentina, and Nigarhan is also from Turkey. We're looking at adding people to the board still. We're very kind of proactive about trying to get someone who represents Africa on the board, and India is obviously almost the center of chess at this point, so it's clearly a very important place. We have already had people signing up to be advocates from Africa and India, which to me suggests that there probably is definitely some desire from it. But cultures vary massively around the world. To some extent, I think this has been highlighted more in Western media, but I think the issues are global, and I think there's a desire at the moment, kind of from everywhere. I mean, I've definitely spoken to people about this from, well, maybe not China. Actually, yeah, China as well. No, I've spoken to people from China and Russia about this, and women, and they definitely feel the same way. So it's maybe not everyone. It's maybe not as widespread, but there's absolutely uh, a a desire for this kind of program in, I would say, every country.
Okay, good. This advocates thing seems to sort of be the cornerstone of it so far. But I mean, how can you sort of ensure that advocates are sort of dressed for actually handling this responsible? How can I mean, one of your arguments is there's no one else we really can trust to go to and talk. Well, why can we go to you? Why can we trust you? Would be my question.
why can you trust
No,
me?
why can not you personally, but I mean, no, you, no, but I mean, sort of the advocates in general. How can you educate people? How can they be more trustworthy than generally and such in a way?
Yeah. So essentially, when I developed the advocacy program, I took a lot of what I learned from, I used to work with children with disabilities back in the US, and I had to go through a lot of training for that. So I personally had already had experience doing advocacy work beforehand. I also worked with a sociologist in the US to develop this so that obviously advocates aren't licensed medical professionals. We're not therapists, but we can educate people on how to respond to survivors and people who are experiencing misconduct, and uh, teach them certain skills to help support these people, and also provide them with the resources to allow the survivor to navigate through the process and make an empowered decision on what they want to do in their case. Um, and this is, tailored for the chess community specifically, from my experience, from Daji's experience, from, Lula's experience, and other women that we've spoken to over the past 6 months. Um, and so it's developed from a lot of experience, as well as, advocates. They're required to have a background check, and, the class sizes are small so that we can kind of get to know people and make sure that they are up to standard of what we think advocates should be. But obviously, we know in the long run that no one's perfect, and some people could slip through the cracks. And so, we also set up a reporting mechanism in place should it come out later that an advocate was a part of misconduct. And um, by having that in place and recognizing that, you know, people can make mistakes, I think that makes people trust us more as well. And that we will actually do something should, uh, anything come out in the future. But um, yeah.
Interesting. How would it work? You said there will be advocates at tournaments. So basically, the name of the advocate would be known, and how should players react to that if they want to get in touch? Do you have sort of specific guideline for that, or how does it work?
Yeah, so everyone that goes through the advocacy training is their name is publicized on our Find an Advocates page, and clubs will also, how we're working with them is, um, for example, the Sligo tournament in Ireland, they want to have advocates, and so the advocate's name will be posted on their tournament website, and so should someone want to reach out to them, it's on that tournament website and our website. We also have a form on our website that people can fill out if they want to be connected with an advocate. Uh, we also envisioned the advocacy program being accessible virtually as well. So, if I'm here in Austria and Daji's in Sweden and I wanted to talk to Daji as my advocate, then I could reach out to him and we could speak online and talk about whatever I was going through. And so they can just reach out to us and we'll connect them. We are keeping everything in house just because privacy and confidentiality is really important to us. When people reach out to us, it's two people that see it, and it's either me or Daji, and then whoever the advocate that we're connecting them to. We have a very survivor-oriented privacy policy, so we're trying to keep things as private and confidential as possible.
But it almost sounds like you are like an emergency service. Basically, anyone in the chess world who had a bad experience can basically log onto your website, easily find a way to get in touch, and very quickly be sort of helped. Is that understand it correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, impressive. It's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, you're even imagining, let's say, at the start of the tournament, the organizers will announce that there is an advocate here, basically like appeals committee or anything. But sort of that, I assume, from your perspective, the more everybody is aware that you are there. I mean, even for those who will behave wrongly, hopefully it could be an incentive not to do it. I mean, is that how you're seeing it as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I think we envision this trying to normalize this as much as possible, and it should be as normal as at the start of the round they announce you really shouldn't have your phone with you. These are your arbiters for today. These are your advocates for today, and like it should be as normal as that. And then everyone feels safe. Everyone knows that they always have someone to turn to, and I think it will act as a deterrent because people will know that there's always someone there.
When I read your website, that was one thing that struck me, that you said that, I mean, well, you can do a lot of help and support, but for instance, with legal things, you cannot help, if that's understanding it correctly.
Yeah, so we are not like we cannot provide like legal advice. We ourselves have a lawyer, but our lawyer mainly deals with, the legalities of running a nonprofit. We can point you into the direction of where you can find legal help. So in the US, there is another nonprofit organization. It's called helpingsurvivors.org. They specifically connect survivors with pro bono legal work. So to kind of work through the legal process of what that would look like for anyone who kind of wants to go through the legal system to solve their cases. But um, we ourselves are more of kind of a resource and support hub.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Um, I think I have. Well, I'm too much a fan of the project. I've more or less run out of critical questions. But maybe there is something that you would like to add. I haven't asked you about.
I think one thing that's really important for us is that although we're the Women in Chess Foundation, we really are like for everyone, and we want to make chess safe for everyone. And with the advocacy program specifically, we think it's really important for men and women to get involved, because one thing we talked about was uh, the possibility for misconduct to go reported with young boys and up and coming uh, young boys in the chess world. And so we want to have a diverse group of advocates. So if there are men in chess who think the advocacy program might only be for women, um, that's not necessarily the case. And so yeah.
And well, when you mentioned minors, I assume parents are also very welcome to
Hmm.
report, and well, you will provide support for them as well, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, anyone who is around the chess world in any capacity, ideally, involved in over the board chess in some way, is welcome to apply to become an advocate. And I definitely think it's very important that we have men involved with this, because I think men are by far the best role models for other men. I think it's just the reality of life, and I think as men we do have a responsibility to set a good example for others, especially with the next generation. And I think this is a very positive step towards improving the chess community massively, because I think this, to me, this is the biggest problem in the chess world. The fact that only 15% of rated players are women is something that is not good for the chess world, but it's also a massive potential. Like it's almost an untapped market of 50% of the population, and the amount of opportunity for growth there in terms of people playing in tournaments, people buying chess books, people making online content is just huge. So yeah, this is the first step, I think, towards solving that, but there's still a long way to go, and we have plans with other areas as well. So
How can people help? I understand, of course, that one can enlist as an advocate, but that, well, that could be quite time consuming for the individual. I mean, you actually, well, and rightfully so, you have quite some expectations. That's only reasonable if someone has to function to give advice for people in this situation. But is there other ways people can help? Or how do you work financially? How independent are you? Do you have massive donors? Is there anything you want to declare on that?
Yeah, so we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit registered in the US. So we are a not-for-profit organization. Every donation that's made goes to um, either running the advocacy program or helping us, help clubs and federations with safe play guideline reforms. We have big dreams of, putting on events, kind of to set the standard for how women events should be conducted and run and marketed. And we want to do sponsorships for young up and coming female chess players. We want to do mentorship programs. We have a lot of ideas. But yeah, so we're strictly like donation via the website. And I don't know, Dodgy, do you have anything else to add to that?
yeah, we would love some massive donors. That would be wonderful. We don't currently have any, but we're still new. So.
Yeah, it's only been
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Well, I assume it's been 2 weeks since you launched. I mean, well, I have. I mean, I went through the web pages. Everything is actually explained quite thoroughly. You must have spent a considerable amount of time getting ready for this launch, right?
Yeah, we've been working on this since February, March.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, a very long time.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of conversations with different people in the chess world, different heads of federations, different people from clubs, different players. So a lot of thought has gone into this, and it's taken us 6 or 7 months to put everything together.
Do you feel extremely welcomed, or would you also feel some resistance? I mean, a theory could be that while not much has done against these things, it's because it's uncomfortable, or even for some, maybe they will lose some privileges and such. Do you feel extremely welcomed, or do you feel actually some ambiguity towards you?
I expected much more negativity, and the overwhelming response so far has been very positive. We For the first couple of weeks we've had no real pushback on social media. There's obviously occasionally you'll get some comments, which is totally normal, I think, on the internet, but certainly far less than I expected. And we've had a lot of people reaching out to us to either help, to volunteer to do stuff with us, or to become advocates, or even to help us financially, whether it's through sponsorship or through different things. So yeah, we'll see. And I think overall there's been a lot of enthusiasm, I think, and we're only just starting. I think once we start to push things more, I think it's only going to get bigger.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me much. I think the problem has been a long. I mean, I've been in the chess world much longer than you two, and the problem has been around. I would say that there has probably been frustrating that nothing is being done, or perhaps people who like to do something, they have no clue about what to do. I mean, well, you seem to actually have an idea of what should be done. I mean, well, you are copying things from other spheres, and that's meant as a compliment. Why should chess invent the wheel again? It's much better to go on used practices and such. You seem to bring some stuff there. So, I mean, well, from my perspective, it sounds very promising, and I know much more about your project. So, really, best of luck. I sincerely really hope it goes well, and I hope that you will keep this amazing energy and love you have for the project. So,
Thanks.
thanks a lot for passing by.
Thanks
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Go to womaninchess.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.